And what are nutrients? What are nutrients and what are the types of nutrients? So the chemical substance present in our food are called nutrients. So the chemical substance present in our food are called nutrients. And what are the types of nutrients? First is carbohydrates. So carbohydrates, it gives energy. Carbohydrates, it gives energy and it is an energy giving food. So it is an energy giving food and carbohydrates are nutrients that give energy to do work and they are called energy giving food. So carbohydrates are nutrients that gives energy to do work and this is also called energy giving food. So carbohydrates is called energy giving food. And people who do more physical work need more carbohydrates. As we know, the people who do the more physical work, it needs the more carbohydrates. So what do you mean by carbohydrates? So this is called energy giving food. And what are the types of carbohydrates? Sugar and starch. Sugar and starch are the types of carbohydrates. And how can we obtain carbohydrate? We can obtain carbohydrate from the rice, from the wheat, and from the potatoes. These are the source of carbohydrates. And what are the another source of carbohydrates? Rice, wheat, and potato, it contains carbohydrates. And what are the types of carbohydrates? It have two types, sugar and starch. Sugar and starch. And how can we get sugar? Grapes and sugarcane. Grapes and sugarcane. Grapes and sugarcane are source of sugar. And next is, how can we check the presence of starch in a given food item? And what is the activity? Suppose we are taking potato and then if we are cutting potato into small piece, then if we add 2 to 3 drops of iodine solution on it, then if it turns into the blue black, then it contains starch. Otherwise, it does not contain starch. So how can we check starch in a given food item? So suppose we are taking any food item, suppose we are taking potato, and if we are taking 2 to 3 drops of potato, 2 to 3 drops of iodine on it, if it turns into the blue black, then it contains starch, otherwise it does not contain starch. And what are the types of carbohydrate? What are the types of carbohydrates? Sugar and starch. Sugar and starch are the two types of carbohydrates. So this is the activity to check the starch in a given food item. And next nutrient is proteins. And then is fat. And then is vitamins. So what do you mean by proteins? Protein is called bodybuilding food. Protein is called bodybuilding food. So protein, it helps us to grow and protein is called bodybuilding food. And how can we obtain protein? Pulses, milk, egg, fish, meat, cheese, peas, these are the rich source of protein. So these are the rich source of protein. So how can we obtain protein? From the pulses, from the milk, from the egg, from the fish, from the meat, from the cheese and peas. These are the source of protein. So protein is called bodybuilding food. So protein is called bodybuilding food. So protein is called bodybuilding food. And what are the source of protein? Pulses, milk, egg, fish. pulses, milk, egg, fish, these are the source of protein. So these are the source of protein. So protein is called body building food. So protein is called body building food. And how can we get protein? From the pulses, from the milk, from the egg, from the fish, and from the meat, from the cheese. These are the rich source of protein. And next is what is the another source of food? That is fat. And fat, it is also gives us energy. But if we compare carbohydrates with the fat, then fat gives more energy as compared to the fat. So fat gives more energy as compared to the carbohydrates. So how can we get fat? From the butter, from the ghee, from the cheese. So these are the sources from which we can get fat. So nuts are shown in the figure, ghee is shown in the figure, and cooking oil is shown in the figure. So these are the sources of fat. And fat gives us energy to do work. So fat gives us energy to do work. And how it gives us energy? As we know, fat, it keeps the body warm. If we eat the nuts, ghee, and cooking oil, then the body keeps remain warm. And the extra food is stored in the body for future use. We must not have excess of fat in our diet as it may lead to the obesity overnight. So if we must not have excess of fat. If we eat excess of fats in our diet, then it leads to a disease, and this disease is called obesity. If we eat the excess of fat in our diet, then this leads to a disease, and this disease is called obesity. And due to obesity, it takes the high blood pressure disease and diabetes. And due to these diseases, due to obesity, the diseases just like the high blood pressure and diabetes occur. So what are the source of fat? So fat gives us energy to do work, and they give us energy more as compared to the carbohydrates. And these are the energy giving food. And how can we get fat? From the butter, from the ghee, from the cooking oil, from the cheese, nuts. So these are the rich source of fat. So these are the rich source of fat. And what is the function of fat? It keeps our body warm. And if we eat these items rich in fat, then extra fat is stored in our body. And if it contains extra fat in our body, then it leads to a disease, and this disease is called obesity. So this disease is called obesity, and it leads to a high diseases that, just like the high blood pressure and diabetes. It leads to a disease just like the high blood pressure and diabetes. And fat, as we know, fat, it gives us more energy to do work. And these are the energy giving food. Fats and carbohydrate, these are the energy giving food. And it leads to a disease just like the high blood pressure and diabetes. And next is vitamins. So fat gives us energy to do work, but but if we compare the energy getting from the carbohydrate and fat, then fat gives more energy as compared to the carbohydrates. And how can we get fat? From the butter, from the ghee, from the cooking oil, from the cheese, from the nuts, we can obtain fat. And what is the function of fat? Fat helps the body to keep our body warm. And what is the disease due to the extra fat? And this leads to a disease called obesity. This leads to a condition, and this condition is called obesity. And next is vitamins, and then is minerals. So what do you mean by vitamins? What do you mean by minerals? So these are the source of food. So these are the sources of food. First is carbohydrates, and next is protein, and then is fat, and then is vitamins. Carbohydrates, fat, protein, and then is vitamins, and then minerals. So these are the sources of food. These are the components of food. So I'm showing the with the help of slides. So what do you mean by the nutrients? So these what is the definition of nutrient? Nutrient are the food substances needed by our body to be healthy and strong. So nutrients, what are the nutrients? These are the food substances needed by our body to become healthy and strong. न्यूट्रिएंट्स क्या होते हैं? वो फूड सब्सटेंस होते हैं जिससे हम हेल्दी रहते हैं और स्ट्रॉन्ग रहते हैं. And what are the types of nutrients? First is carbohydrates, and next is fat, and third is proteins, and then is vitamins, and then is minerals. And what do you mean by carbohydrates? Energy giving food. So carbohydrate is energy giving food. And what do you mean by fat? It is also energy giving food. And protein is body building food. And vitamins and minerals are called protective food. So what are the types of nutrients? First is carbohydrate, and then is fat, and then is proteins, and then is vitamins, and then is minerals. And carbohydrates, it is energy giving food, and fat is also energy giving food. And protein is body building food, and vitamins and minerals are protective food. So what are nutrients? Carbohydrates, fats, protein, vitamins, and minerals. So these are the types of nutrients. So these are the types of nutrients. Carbohydrates is energy giving food, and fats is also energy giving food. Protein is body building food, and vitamin and minerals are protective food. Vitamins and minerals are called protective foods. Carbohydrates is energy giving food, and fat is also energy giving food, and protein is body building food, and vitamins and minerals are called protective food. So what are the types of nutrients? Carbohydrates, fats, protein, vitamins, and minerals. So carbohydrates and fat, this is energy giving food, and protein, it is also body building food, and vitamins and minerals, it is also called protective food. And what do you mean by energy giving food? The food which gives us energy to do work. Carbohydrates and fat are energy giving food. But fat gives more energy as compared to the carbohydrate. And protein is called bodybuilding food because protein builds the muscles of our body. And vitamins and minerals are called protective food. And why it is called protective food? Because it protects us from many diseases. So this is the carbohydrates, and these are the sources of carbohydrates from the potato, from the rice, from the bread, from the banana. These are the sources of carbohydrates. So you have to remember 5 sources of carbohydrates. From which item we can obtain carbohydrates. And these are the carbohydrates. And what are the types of carbohydrate? Main source of energy, and it keeps our body warm. And what are the types of carbohydrates? Sugar and starch. Sugar and starch, these are the 2 types of carbohydrates. And if a person do more physical work, then it needs more carbohydrates. If a person do more physical work, then it needs more carbohydrate. And what are the source of carbohydrates? Potato, banana, sugar. Potato, banana, sugar, these are the source of carbohydrates. So carbohydrates, it keeps our body warm. And what are the types of carbohydrates? Sugar and starch. Sugar and starch, these are the 2 types of carbohydrates. And what are the source of carbohydrates? Cereals, potato, bananas, and sugar. So what are carbohydrates? It is a source of energy and which keeps our body warm. So this is a source of fat from butter, from oil. We can obtain fat. So these are the sources of fat. So you have to remember from which food item we can obtain fat. Butter, milk, for butter, ghee, soybean oil. So these are the sources of fat. And next is what are the energy giving food? So carbohydrates and fats are called energy giving food, and the fat gives us more energy to do work as compared to the carbohydrates. As we know, it gives us more energy as compared to the carbohydrates. So what are the source of fat? Ghee, butter, oil, cream, cheese. Ghee, butter, oil, cream, and cheese. So these are the source of fat. If we take excess of fat, then these will lead to a disease, and this disease is called obesity. If we take the excess of fat, then this will lead to a disease called obesity. And what are the proteins? Protein is called bodybuilding food. And if we need the protein for our growth and development of our body. And what are the proteins? Protein is called, it repair damaged cell, and this is called bodybuilding food. And from which item we can obtain protein? Egg, fish, pulses, milk. So these are the sources of protein. And why it is called bodybuilding food? हम प्रोटीन को बॉडी बिल्डिंग फूड क्यों कहते हैं? क्योंकि हमारे जो सेल हैं वो डैमेज सेल हैं जो बॉडी के, उसको वो रिपेयर करता है, बिल्ड करता है. So this is called body building food. And children need more protein as compared to the adults. जो छोटे बच्चों को प्रोटीन की क्वांटिटी ज्यादा चाहिए होती है as compared to the adults. And from which item we can obtain protein? Egg, fish, pulses, meat, and milk. So these are the source of protein. So these are the source of protein from which we can get these food items. And next is vitamins. Vitamin, it is needed in the small amount. So vitamin is also needed in the small amount, and it keeps up our good body healthy. And vitamins help us to have a good vision, and they food rich in the vitamin protect our body from the disease. So vitamins are called protective food because it protects us from many diseases. So vitamins are called protective food because it protects us from many diseases. And vitamins help us to have a good vision and healthy skin. So vitamin is needed in the small amount, and vitamin, food rich in vitamin, it keeps our body healthy and strong. And vitamins are needed in very small amount. Vitamins are needed in very small amount. And these are the source of vitamins. And next is, there are different vitamins are shown in the figure A, B, C, D, E, K. And these are the vitamin source: leafy vegetable, carrots, liver, egg, milk, butter. And what are the function of these vitamins? Vitamin A, eyesight and healthy skin. And vitamin B, and its function is for repair, for the growth and nervous system. And vitamin C, it keeps of our healthy, keeps our germs healthy, and it protects also from the cold. And vitamin D, it keeps our bones and teeth healthy. And vitamin E, it gives proper growth. And vitamin K, it helps us to clothe. So there are different vitamins are shown in the figure. And minerals, what are the different types of mineral? Calcium, iron, sodium, and potassium. So there are different kinds of minerals are shown in the figure. And what are the minerals? Calcium, iron, sodium, and potassium. Calcium, iron, sodium, and potassium are called minerals. And mineral help us to stay fit and healthy. Mineral help us to stay fit and healthy. And what are the minerals? Calcium, iron, sodium, and potassium. And it helps our body from diseases. And vitamins and minerals are called protective food. So these are the minerals. And what is the importance? Iron, it gives red color. And calcium, it makes our bones strong. And phosphorus, it helps our muscles. And iodine, it also we can obtain from the salt, fish, and prawns. So these are the source of iodine. So you have to remember the different kinds of nutrients. And what are the nutrients? First nutrient is carbohydrates, and next is fat, and next is protein, and then is vitamins, and then is minerals. So there are different kinds of nutrients are shown in the figure: carbohydrates, fats, protein, vitamins, and minerals. So energy giving food. So what are energy giving food? Carbohydrates and fats, these are called energy giving food. And proteins are called body building food. And vitamins and minerals are called protective food. So there are different kinds of nutrients are shown in the figure. So carbohydrate, these are the food items from which we can obtain carbohydrates. So these are the carbohydrates, sugar and starch. Sugar and starch, these are the two types of carbohydrates. And next is fat. So these are the food items from which we can obtain fat. So next is uh, ghee, butter, oil, cream, cheese are the source of fat, and it is called energy giving food. And how can we obtain protein? From the egg, from the fish, from the meat and pulses and milk, we can obtain protein. And these are the source of protein. And vitamin and minerals are called protective food. Vitamins and minerals are called protective food. Vitamins and minerals are called protective food. So you have to remember the different kinds of nutrients. What are the nutrients? Carbohydrates, protein, fat, minerals, and vitamins. And carbohydrates and fat are called energy giving food. But fat gives us more energy as compared to the carbohydrates. And next is protein. Protein is called body building food. And fat is also gives us energy to do work. And vitamins, it also protect us from the disease. Vitamins, it also protect us from the disease. Protein, fat, and vitamins, it is also called, protein is called bodybuilding food, and fat is also called, fat is also gives us more energy as compared to the carbohydrates. And vitamins are also called protective food. Vitamins and minerals are called protective food. Vitamins and minerals are called protective food. And next is water. So we have in this lecture what we have studied, the carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. So we have studied the three components: carbohydrates, protein, and fat. In the next lecture, we will study about the vitamins and minerals and water. So you have to revise the topic carbohydrates, and carbohydrate is called energy giving food. And what are the types of carbohydrates? Sugar and starch. And how can we check starch in a given food item? If we take any food item and if we put 2 to 3 drops of iodine solution over it, then if it turns into the blue blood, then it is contains starch. Otherwise, it does not contain starch. And next is protein. Protein is called bodybuilding food, and protein, it helps us to keep our body. It helps us to keep our body healthy, and it repairs the damaged cell of our body. And what are the items from which we can obtain protein? Pulses, milk, egg, fish. And fat, this is also a source of energy. So butter, ghee, cooking oil, cheese, and nuts, so these are the rich source of fat. And what is the function of fat? Fat helps us the body to keep our body warm, and extra food is stored in the future use, and it lead to a condition, and this condition is called obesity. And this is a item from which we can obtain the fat. And vitamins. In the next lecture, we will study about the topic vitamins and minerals. So if you have any query regarding this topic, you can ask.